What's going on, everyone? Welcome to Movie Emporium's TV review of the Apple TV Plus original series, The Afterparty Season 2. This will follow the penultimate episode, which is episode 9, titled Isabel, and of course is directed by, once again, Christopher Miller. Okay, so here we are, the second to last episode of the Afterparty Season 2. It's been quite the entertaining ride, to be fairly honest. I cannot wait for the next episode, which will give us all the reveals, will give us the killer, and it will be very, very fascinating and probably really good. Because once again, this is another fantastic episode, directed and starring a fantastic group of individuals. And finally, instead of each individual character being interviewed one by one, this is a culmination of all the characters coming in to see what Isabel has to say. So everybody that's in this show that isn't Edgar, who is dead, is in this episode as characters that are witnessing what as Isabel has to say, because she claims she knows who the killer is. But as we know, and as we see through the entire episode, her knowing who the killer is can't happen in this episode because it is not officially the end of the season. So therefore, she can say she knows who the killer is, but we know for a simple fact that she doesn't know for a simple fact that the killer is who she thinks the killer is. With that said, this episode deals a lot with Elizabeth Perkins finally. She, of course, has been in the background, not really been a full kind of facing forward character because, you know, it's one of those characters that is very mysterious. You can bring up a lot of interesting ideas about her. She's constantly drinking. Elizabeth Perkins plays it perfectly as she does in everything she ever does. You know, Weeds and Big and whatever she's been in. She's a fantastic actress, very funny, very stoic, just very well played, especially in this episode, which shows a rich widowess in a lot of respects. Her husband, as she says, died in a plane crash, falling asleep, as several people died, screaming in terror. And it's really, really funny how, you know, because they're like, oh, I thought she fell asleep, or died falling asleep. And she's like, no, he did fall asleep, but he died in a plane crash. It's pretty funny stuff. It's disturbing, but it's very, very funny. But I really like what this episode is doing. I think it's a very fascinating take. It's a very Hitchcockian, very paranoid style filmmaking aspect that Christopher Miller and the crew are doing, where they take that very kind of, you know, paranoid look into somebody who is clearly on a lot of alcohol, has been taking drugs because her husband died. It's very much like that, you know, 1960s, 1970s, like, you know, suspense feel to it, where everything feels hyper realized, hyper eccentric when it comes to, like, for instance, when they're at the gravesite of her husband, everything's like really overexposed with the greens. It feels like they put, you know, carpeting on the ground for the greens. Like, everything is just hyper realized, and it's supposed to, as these episodes have done, it goes into the mindset of the character that is the character of the episode. So for Isabel, she's a very dramatic person. She's a person with a lot of paranoia. She's a person with a lot of just demons. She's an individual that really, you can tell that there's something truly off about her, and that's what this episode truly does well. And on top of that, because it's paranoid in a lot of respects, she, you know, is drinking gin. She forgets a lot of stuff, or she thinks she's not forgetting, but she is forgetting. It's not really, you know, you can kind of take it either way. That's why this isn't like an unreliable narrator episode. So we have that specific thing, you know, or her son, Edgar, who is, you know, you could take him either way in this episode, could be using her to do the conservatorship thing. And, you know, he hires Dr. Shulkin to, you know, keep an eye on her, be manipulating her to get her into like an insane asylum. You know, the idea of like the simple fact that, like, you know, the pills that she's being given are this like little blue pill that she thinks is sleeping pills, but it's something that she can't sleep. She hasn't been able to sleep for weeks. She's like rearranging all the spices. She's like, you know, where did she get the sword from? Her daughter Hannah says she ordered the sword, that she ordered the armor, that she ordered the trampoline, which is a really funny joke. I love the idea. He's like, trampoline? Edgar's looking at her funny. He's like, trampoline? And then he talks about how the lizard Roxana is like really getting sick, and there's some jokes brought in about how, you know, she doesn't eat cake. You know, it's a lizard, for God's sake. So lizards don't eat cake, and they don't eat ice, shaved ice, and, you know, I don't know. He's just, I love how Roxana is kind of a character in its own right, of just like the absurdity of this world that is Edgar's family and Isabel and Hannah and stuff like that, and just the eccentricities of being very, very wealthy and how that kind of plays out. The mannerisms and the kind of the eyes of Zack Woods' Edgar character, and how he like almost feels like he has a wry smile, and like how he uses Zack Woods has this like rhythm and cadence that he uses, and you see it in Silicon Valley or anything he's ever been in, where there's something kind of off kilter about what he's saying. So when you're watching his character play out through this entire episode, and you're watching Elizabeth Perkins, Isabel, become more and more paranoid as she thinks her son and the whole cryptocurrency is starting to, that he wants to take over the wealth, and so on and so forth. You start to imagine that, maybe there's something sinister. You've always seen like in the, say the Manchurian Candidate or something, like where nothing can feel real, but there's something like truly weird there and something feels off. But it could be the other side where she's just so paranoid about everything and the drugs she's taking and the alcohol she's taking that Edgar could be truly like, trying to help her and worried about her. I mean, that's what's so great about what this episode does and being homage to a Hitchcockian feel is until we get to the last episode, you can't really tell what is real and what's not, whether she really is doing this and is really kind of hurting herself, or whether Edgar is trying to take over the family fortune to run his Ponzi schemes or his schemes, and you see the different scenes play out where she thinks that Sebastian's character is trying to manipulate her and how she thinks Edgar is doing that. And then you have like the whole idea of like, the purse thing when, and the lizard thing when, of course, Anik takes the purse. And then you get the whole running joke, which I had to watch this twice because, I just had to think about it, where the voices she's hearing, she's hearing some orchestral children's choir singing to her, and if you listen to it, you realize what's going on later on, which is really funny because she talks about how her husband really liked this like pop group or whatever, and then when she gets she has the the letter that she's going to read out for Edgar's wedding gift or whatever. And she put the little star on it, and she thinks she put the little star on it, but she doesn't. Like, she opens up and there's no star on it. And it's the lyrics of Bop from Hanson. If you're somebody like me, you remember how big that song was. But that's probably one of my favorite jokes in the entire series, because it's the nature of like, her husband really liked that song, but she thinks Edgar is trying to bait her into doing something stupid. So there's a lot of things there that you have to kind of look into, and you kind of have to wonder, what exactly is the truth? How unreliable is she as a narrator? Is she telling the truth? Is she not telling the truth? When she goes up to give the hair clip or whatever it's called to Grace, she notices the prenup thing in the thing that hasn't been signed, and she tells Grace, sign it because you get $1 million out of it. And what's really interesting is like, what she's doing. Is it a ploy because she really did kill Edgar, or is it she sees something truly off? Like, that's what's so great about what this episode does and what this whole season and even the series has done, is it adds in those little kind of questions, and it adds in those little nuggets of like, maybe it's not true. It's like that, you think, oh, I got it. Of course, when Travis goes out to talk to Sebastian, he's trying to, figure out everything. And it adds that like level of doubt into your brain. And that's what this series does so well, and what it creates so well. So she sees like the prenup thing, and, they add in a little bit of humor there. And, the whole thing with like, the handbag and the cameras being taken. There could be, what is going on there? Maybe she's believing Neek did something. It's just, there's a lot of these things that are happening, but we get a lot of concluding pieces of the chessboard. And, for instance, like Travis when he got slapped and all that good stuff, and like, Dr. Shulkin, which looks exactly like, of course, Alfred Hitchcock, which is why it's a very Hitchcockian joke, which I like a lot. And like the whole idea of the napkins, which I didn't mention in the last episode, and I felt bad that I forgot that. But if you look at the napkins in the last episode, they actually say Edgar and Gail, but there's been a running joke throughout the entire season, which I completely forgot about, completely calls Grace Gail. And there's another interesting kind of idea there where, they're playing, whatever that game is that you put the pieces down, you get points for spelling out words, Pictionary or whatever, not Pictionary, but anyways, whatever it's Scrabble or whatever it's called. And she thinks that Edgar puts down Gail, because they're going to introduce her. He's going to bring in Grace later on in the episode. But then she goes back to the board when she calls Grace Gale, and Grace is like, well, I do care that you're calling me Gale. I mean, it's really weird. And she goes back to the board and it says Grace on it. And so it leaves that nugget of doubt, like, okay, is she telling the truth? Is she not telling the truth? Unreliable narrator, reliable narrator. It's very well put together and very well thought out. And of course it leads to the cake incident where Edgar brings over cake in the middle of the after party, and she thinks that Edgar is going to poison her so he can get the wealth. And then the idea of her switching the cake like in Princess Bride or something like that, when Kyler or whatever his name is distracts him for the shaved ice thing, and she eats a piece of cake, he eats a piece of cake, and she says she killed him. Well, of course, once again, this is one of those things where you have to go, okay, this is the second to last episode, so I don't think that's the way it works. So Anik goes, well, that doesn't make any sense. And I'm like, yes, it doesn't make any sense, because, of course, Devil's Trumpet, which Travis just found out, was, of course, only takes 15 minutes after drinking to kill him. It doesn't take 90 minutes, which is before the after party in this whole reception. So it leads into who killed him. And, there was a whole incident at the end of the episode last week where Isabel goes, Grace didn't kill her, or didn't kill Edgar. And I found that very funny. I really found that interesting. But it also leads to one more thing I haven't talked about yet, which is the idea of Travis goes out to talk to Sebastian. And Travis has been he's one of those characters that means well, but it's just not very smart. But there is a lot of, when we talked about Travis' episode, there's a lot of darkness there, because Travis got screwed by Sebastian, or by Edgar's cryptos thing or whatever it was, and he figures out that Sebastian's trying to sell all this stuff off because Edgar had been putting his own money into a shell company, which inflated the price of the cryptocurrency, and Sebastian pretty much admits to it. He says, well, the house wins, so I don't care, whatever, that's how people become rich. And I don't know if it leads to anything, if it leads to the murder of Edgar or anything like that, but it is showing that Sebastian, either he is not a very good person, or he knows that he's screwing over a lot of people, and just I don't know. It's going to be really interesting to see, but I like that Sebastian at the end of the police finally arrive, which is what I figured would happen. And of course they know Isabel, the police know Isabel and stuff like that, and they talk about, oh, well, there's a murder, and we find out that of course Sebastian was she told Sebastian to call the police, so it was almost like she was stalling basically, so she was telling a little bit, which leads into, okay, so she's not a reliable narrator. I mean, it's a very interesting thing. And then the whole closet thing with when Zoe's in there, she goes in there and she finds the napkins, which have not Edgar and Gale, but have Edgar and Grace. But that's kind of where it leads off again. It leads off to the police are there. We're going to find out who the killer is. And it's going to be very, very interesting to see who actually did it. Now, with that said, to kind of go in my theory, once again, I figured maybe we'd have some semblance of maybe who did it. But as we see, I don't think it's Grace or Isabel. I really don't. I think it's, there's been a lot of comments in the last episode, which I was really surprised that people do think it's Ulysses. And that would make a lot of sense. She wanted to protect, Zoe and Grace. She especially wanted to protect Grace from, a tragedy. She loves these kids, or he loves these kids, and, he wants to protect his family, and maybe feels and knows that Edgar did something truly wrong in the way he's acting. So I definitely get why people think it's Ulysses. I don't think it's Ulysses. To be fairly honest, that's just me. I think we're going to find out it's going to be, maybe an accident, maybe maybe it was Fang. I don't know. There's clues in this episode with how the candles are placed, and I brought this up to someone I was talking to, where if you look on the bookshelf behind Hannah and Edgar when they're in the after party room or whatever where the after party takes place, there's a bunch of dots on which are the wine bottles or alcohol bottles or whatever, but there's a bunch of dots up on that up on there. They're different colors. Now that could be just an aesthetic. I mean, the candles can be aesthetic. There could be aesthetics all over the place, but the way those bottles are placed and the way they kind of are positioned, that's a clue. It has to be a clue because it goes dot. I thought it was a Morse code thing where it's a dot and then you get lines like that. So I went into a Morse code thing online. It doesn't read anything, so I don't know Morse code very well. So maybe it could just be, you know, the color symbolize a person or something like that. I don't entirely know, or it can symbolize an episode of the series. I don't know. I really don't. And that's my fault of this, trying to condense what's going on in the series, because there is a lot of clues, and I'm sure people have figured out who murdered Edgar at this point. But I'm glad that the series has allowed, you know, characters to give their opinions, give their thoughts, give their views, to, you know, keep the series, as the last season did, on its toes, to even get to the penultimate episode and we truly don't know who killed Edgar. That's a really hard thing to do, because it takes a lot of patience and structure. And when you do something like the movie Clue, or like I said, Afterparty season 1, or, you know, Only Murders in the Building or something like that, there has to be a level of patiency that you, the viewer, and the writers and staff have to do to create something truly special and unique, and to be something truly smart, because you could have given it away like 5 episodes ago and it would just kind of ruin the series, because people would have figured it out. But because they're so good at like conditioning you to try and watch certain things, that you'll miss certain things, so you have to go back and rewatch it. So what I'll do is, after this, you know, after the season ends, I'll probably go back and rewatch it to see if I can find anything about who the killer was. And I think it'll be really interesting. I think it'll be really neat to watch it again. So, yeah, with that said, that's kind of where I'm going to leave it. Like I said, I don't think it's Ulysses. I think it may be Zoe. I mean, to be fairly honest, that could be my best guess, or it was just an accident. You know, maybe the lizard, Roxana, just ate a piece of the devil's trumpet and died, or maybe it's asleep. There has been the nature of like how lizards have, maybe it's like really cold out and the lizards have been known to fall to the ground. If you know, like I know, lizards not be dead. It's just, I don't know. That's whatever. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm going to leave it on my thoughts of this episode. But for my score, I'm going to give it a 9.5 out of 10. It's a really fun episode. It's really, you know, it can be a little confusing, but it's a really, really good episode. So I think the next episode is going to be a banger too. So yeah, that's how I look at it. So yeah, 9.5 out of 10. So anyways, that'll do it. That'll be my take on the Afterparty season 2, episode 9, which is Isabel. As I always say in the comments below, do you still think it's Ulysses? Who do you think it could be? We're 1 episode away, so give me your honest opinion, thoughts, and all that good stuff, as I always say. So there you go. But with that said, thank you so much. If you like what you see on this channel, hit the subscribe button to join Movie Emporium. Hit that notification bell at the top to find what's coming next. If you like this video, awesome. Hit that like button. And as always, we'll see you guys on the next video. Peace out.